The budget vote speech versus destructive lifestyles. Why no budget vote can save those who refuse to save themselves. The other day, I was yet again in my morning mindfulness ritual, taking a long walk, letting my thoughts roam freely. As I walked, I found myself pondering the budget vote speech, the grand financial declaration that sets the course for our nation. And yet, as predictable as the sun rising, I knew exactly what it would contain. More social grants, more promises to uplift the poor, more government interventions in education and development. Year after year, it is the same script, an endless path down the rabbit hole of handouts and dependency, how to extend social grants to everyone. But then, a realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. No amount of government spending will ever be enough if the people themselves refuse to grow. A country can pour billions into development programs, free houses, increase social grants to people who are supposed to work for themselves, and create opportunities. But none of it matters if the mindset of the people remains stagnant. True development does not begin in Parliament nor in the government's balance sheets. It begins within the individual. Those who truly want to rise will find a way with or without government funding. Those who do not will stay stuck, drowning in escapism, numbing themselves with distractions, blasting loud music to avoid confronting their own thoughts. The other day, I found myself in a taxi, a South African minibus taxi. And if you know anything about these taxis, you know they are moving cages of deafening, numbing music. The minibus taxi is more than just a mode of transport. It is a mirror of the township, a reflection of its people and their habits. Day and night, loud music erupts from every street corner, from every passing car, from every tavern and shack. But why? Why the obsession with loud music? Why the need to fill every waking moment with noise? Nothing in life happens without reason. There is always an underlying meaning whether people recognize it or not. And the truth is harsh. Many people are terrified of silence because silence forces them to confront themselves. They do not want to sit in stillness and reflect on their lives, their choices, their failures, or their potential. They do not want to ask themselves difficult questions. Am I growing? Am I building something meaningful? Am I truly using my time wisely? Or am I just existing, floating through life? Instead, they drown their consciousness in full blast music, in endless partying, in meaningless distractions. Loud music becomes a shield, a barrier against deep thought, against accountability, against the discomfort of self-awareness. And so, while the government debates how to distribute the budget, while politicians argue over policies and funding, the real question remains unanswered. Can a nation truly develop if its people refuse to develop themselves? Money, grants, and programs will never be enough to change a person who does not want to change. And no budget vote speech, no matter how ambitious, will ever save those who refuse to save themselves. The lost power of silence. In a world filled with noise, silence is a forgotten art. Power lies not in the blaring of speakers, but in the stillness that allows a person to truly confront themselves. Yet many people avoid silence as if it were a plague. They drown themselves in loud music, filling every waking moment with sound, not for enjoyment, but as a shield against self-reflection. Why do people fear silence? Silence is where truth lives. It is in the quiet moments, away from distractions, that the mind becomes clear and the soul speaks. But for many, silence is unbearable. It forces an encounter with one's inner self, demanding reflection, accountability, and sometimes painful realizations. Instead of facing reality, people blast music to escape it. Consider a man who goes from one reckless act to another, abandoning responsibilities, breaking hearts, or making decisions that weigh heavily on his conscience. To avoid the guilt, he turns to noise. Full blast music becomes his anesthetic, numbing him from the deep thoughts that would otherwise force him to acknowledge the damage he has caused. The louder the sound, the more distant he feels from the untruth. This avoidance of silence is not limited to those with dark pasts. It is a societal trend. People fear being alone with their thoughts. They fear their failures, their unfulfilled dreams, and their regrets. So they ensure they are never in silence, even at night when the world slows down. They trade restful meditative sleep for restless nights filled with music at full volume, depriving themselves of true rest and peace. Personal destructive lifestyles are a silent epidemic, eating away at the fabric of our potential and keeping us trapped in cycles of mediocrity. These are the habits, behaviors, and choices we make that seem harmless in the moment, but over time erode our ability to grow, to think deeply, and to take control of our lives. They are the subtle ways we sabotage ourselves, often without even realizing it. And the worst part? We've normalized them. We've turned these destructive patterns into a culture, a way of life, and we defend them as if they're harmless. But they're not. They're killing us slowly, quietly, and surely. Noise is not just a distraction. It's a prison. It keeps us trapped in a cycle of avoidance where we never truly confront our realities or take responsibility for our lives. Another destructive lifestyle is the culture of blame. It's easier to point fingers than to look in the mirror. We blame the government, the system, our parents, our circumstances, anyone and anything but ourselves. And while it's true that external factors can limit us, the truth is that we often use these factors as excuses to avoid taking action. Blaming others gives us a false sense of comfort. It allows us to stay stuck because we convince ourselves that our lack of progress is someone else's fault. But this mindset is a trap. It keeps us powerless, waiting for someone else to fix our problems instead of taking ownership of our lives. Growth begins when we stop blaming and start taking responsibility for our choices, our actions, and our future. Perhaps the most insidious destructive lifestyle is the normalization of mediocrity. We've created a culture that celebrates average. We glorify laziness, make excuses for poor choices, and praise bad things. We've convinced ourselves that it's okay to always keep yapping about getting social grants, free education, free universities, free everything. But deep down, we know this is wrong. We know we're capable of more. We know we have dreams and goals that we've buried under layers of excuses and fear. The normalization of mediocrity is a destructive lifestyle because it keeps us from striving for greatness. It convinces us that we're fine where we are, even as we feel the gnawing ache of unfulfilled potential. Silence is uncomfortable. It forces us to confront our thoughts, our fears, and our failures. And because it's uncomfortable, we avoid it at all costs. We fill our lives with noise, distractions, and busyness, never allowing ourselves the space to think deeply or reflect on our lives. But silence is where growth happens. It's where we gain clarity, where we process our emotions, and where we make plans for the future. Without silence, we remain stuck in a cycle of reactivity, constantly responding to external stimuli, but never taking the time to think critically about our lives. Avoiding silence is a destructive lifestyle because it keeps us from connecting with our inner selves and taking control of our destinies. The first step to breaking free from these destructive lifestyles is awareness. We need to recognize the habits and behaviors that are holding us back and take responsibility for changing them. This means embracing silence, even when it's uncomfortable. It means taking ownership of our lives, even when it's easier to blame others. It means doing the hard work, even when we don't feel like it. Growth is not easy. It requires courage, discipline, and a willingness to confront our fears, but it's worth it. Because on the other side of these destructive lifestyles is a life of purpose, clarity, and fulfillment. A life where we're not just surviving, but thriving. A life where we're not just going through the motions, but actively creating the future we want. It's time to stop nursing these destructive lifestyles. It's time to wake up, take responsibility, and start living the life we're truly capable of. Enough of the nonsense. The power to change is within us. The question is, are we willing to use it?